Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. My name is Charlie Strickfaden. It's my privilege that this is my third one of these meetings. I do communications and public affairs. We're joined by a lot of special guests, local officials, and subject matter experts. I can guarantee by the end of this meeting you will be much more informed than you walked in, and that is really what our intent is. To update you about all of the things that we are working collaboratively between the National Park Service and Marin County. And I'd like to just hand introductions off to Laura Joss, General Superintendent of Golden Gate National Recreation Area.
Thank you, Charlie. Charlie's doing a great job as our relatively new Chief of Communications and External Affairs. So he's met many of you in that capacity, and really appreciate Charlie and his staff and many others on our team putting this meeting together tonight. And I'm thrilled to see so many of you take time out of your busy lives to join us. I'm so glad we're not doing this tomorrow night. If you're a Warriors fan, I don't want to assume, but so thanks for being here. We're very honored to have two Marin County supervisors here that have really been with us side by side throughout much of the work that we've been doing at Muir Woods. So I'd like to give them each the opportunity if they would like to say a few words. Supervisor Kate Sears, would you like to speak? Okay, she's going to make Supervisor Dennis Rodoni speak tonight. Thanks to both of you for being here, though.
Thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you, Supervisor Sears. I wish you would have told me earlier, but that's okay. No. I took an opportunity to start looking over the MOU today because I've only been on the job 2.5 years. And I was impressed by the milestones that have been met, especially around the parking and concessions and also the shuttle going into Muir Woods. So we've made a lot of progress, and the county has particularly been working on some of the county issues on county roads, on Panoramic, on Four Corners, the bus length on shuttles coming into the park, and we're making progress on that. But mostly I want to just welcome you all and look forward to hearing your comments tonight and your input. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, Dennis. Great. All right, and we're also very pleased to have Amy Schroeder here from Congressman Huffman's office. And Amy's sitting beside Mayor Stephanie Moulton-Peters, Mill Valley. And thank you to Sean McCrell, Marin County Sheriff. There he is in the back. Thank you, Sean. We really appreciate what you're doing to help make this, the transportation work here, a success. And I'm very pleased to recognize the new CEO and president of the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, Chris Leonards. Chris was in this position, superintendent, before me, so any hard questions I will direct to Chris. So yes, as Charlie said, we're really happy to share an update on the Memorandum of Understanding for Muir Woods with Marin County, and so many of you have taken time to help on this process, and we'll take time at the end of the presentation to allow for questions and answers, so if you could hold your questions until the end. We're going to do a year in review and have a number of updates from subject matter specialists, and thanks for visiting some of their tables ahead of time. So I think, Laura, I'm going to go ahead with my slides. So we're really happy to talk about a little bit beyond Muir Woods, in addition to specific Muir Woods updates. And I do want to recognize one more person that's helped make the transportation program to Muir Woods a great success, and that's Nancy Whalen. She's here with Marin Transit. Nancy has been a stalwart partner and come to, I think, all of our public meetings, and we're very pleased that Marin Transit has a 100% safety record. So thank you for all that you do for our visitors. In terms of Golden Gate overall, the park is over 80,000 acres, and it includes, the Golden Gate National Recreation Area does include, obviously, Muir Woods National Monument and Fort Point National Historic Site. Alcatraz Island gets over 1 million visitors itself, so it's a large component of our operation. We were the most visited park in the National Park Service last year in 2018, over 17 million visitors. And those visitors, we learned recently, brought in 1.6 billion, that's with a B, in economic benefits to the Bay Area community, and that supports 12,600 jobs in the area. So it's quite an active park, and you can read some of the other attributes there on the screen. Okay, Laura. So a major goal of this meeting is to reaffirm our great relationship with Marin County and its communities, including the recent business lease opportunity of the Fort Baker Boathouse and recreation amenities. The boathouse is also known as the Presidio Yacht Club. Some of you might be familiar with that. And in the fall of 2018, we entered into an agreement with the city of Sausalito to continue collaboration with the community as we move forward on the renewal of the Alcatraz Ferry contract and continue to redevelop the Fort Baker area of the park. So we have a lot going on at your neighboring location in Sausalito, Fort Baker. I think I'll hold the mic further from my mouth. Okay. So next slide. Yes, Marin Headlands. Those of you who visit the headlands frequently have noticed we've seen quite an increase in traffic, and we are trying a pilot in the Marin Headlands to reduce the wait time. We've had visitors waiting to get out of the headlands from the top of Conselman 2 to 3 hours on a sunny summer day. So we've tried a few different traffic patterns as pilots, and this summer we're going to be using one that worked well for us last year, and that's to, for the majority of the time, have the Baker Berry Tunnel on the weekends, green light going into the headlands, and then a one-way pattern coming up and over and down Conselman. So that will be in place from May through October of this year, and it really has helped our visitor situation. We've been meeting with community and alerting community members that this change will occur, but we've also been working with the bicycling community, and in response to their concerns, we delineated a one-way uphill for them on Conselman with what are called candlesticks, and that will be re-implemented this year and hopefully keep them safe so they can continue their traditional training runs and uphill rides. So that should improve the situation for all of us. Stinson Beach, many of you heard we had a large storm last year in 2018, this spring, which took out one end of the parking lot. So we've stabilized that parking area and arranged for an assessment for a new configuration by Federal Highways Administration to deal with the flooding issue there. So we're continuing to work with the Stinson Beach community to address their concerns and respond to that previous flooding. And there's always a lot going on in our San Francisco community. We're very excited about planning for our popular Crissy Field area on the bay. It's a wonderful area right now. We want to make it even better. So we're doing some outreach with the community and had a great Crissy Field Day last Saturday with a lot of community members coming out just to give us ideas and see what we might do to improve their experience and make it safe for everyone. We've also got a new embarkation agreement for the Alcatraz Ferry that was signed recently with the Port of San Francisco. It's at the current location where Alcatraz Cruises currently operates. They won the concession contract for the future concession for the next 15 or more years. But we also now have a general agreement with the Port of San Francisco to have that embarkation location as a more permanent opportunity to develop the area for our visitors. So this is the third Marin County community meeting I've attended. And by the end of tonight, you'll hear about our joint efforts since we met last in Mill Valley in the fall of 2018. You'll hear about our plans for Muir Woods for 2019. And I really appreciate everyone being here. This is a brief summary of the MOU, but I think Charlie might be going over that for us.
Is Julian there? You maybe just, Julian, can you turn us down a little bit? A lot? And there we go. Okay, go ahead, Laura. So great to have folks that are still interested in or maintain their interest in the reservation system. That was an important part of how we got started, was parking issues, carrying capacity, and of course we're going to talk a lot about how we're going to continue to care for the resources in Redwood Creek. And we have collected data, as we mentioned this fall. What we found was visitation has sort of evened out over the course of the day. Our visitation, go ahead, yeah, our visitation in 2017 was 1.1 million visitors, and now we're just about 1 million, and that's exactly as we proposed. Is basically we don't, we're hoping not to have any of those huge big days with parking. Obviously, we know exactly how many parking spaces we have, and we're managing those. And so, not unpredictably, the summer months, we've got higher numbers, but basically we're managing it according to the carrying capacity of not only the parking spaces, but the most important thing I hope for all of us is that primeval experience in Muir Woods. And having a wonderful old growth redwood grove doesn't do anybody any good if you have to listen to screaming and yelling and parking and honking and all that sort of stuff, which we do not allow in your Bay Area national parks. So basically, no surprises there. Go on to the next one there. So a little bit about the shuttle utilization, and again, sort of follows the trends of summer visitors and fall and spring snowbirds and international visitors. And then what we found and what we pointed out this fall was obviously everybody likes to have those peak periods. Well, I don't like to get up early, but we're still having lots of capacity early in the morning and later in the evening. So that's the good news to our commercial carriers. And everybody during those core periods, it's still going to be a little bit tighter to get your slot. What we have found is that the international visitors are really figuring this out. They are really learning that, oh, this is a great way for me to make a reservation. I could make plans ahead of time. And from what we're hearing from the commercial carriers, it's working for them. Obviously, we're doing the very best that we can, but again, the primary thing is no matter who goes into Muir Woods, that experience is critical. And I think that's good for both private visitors and commercial operators' visitors. Go ahead. Yeah. So now what I'd like to do is we're going to give you some updates on planned projects in Redwood Creek and that are coming up this summer. And we've got a number of subject matter experts. Darren, you could come up. You are next. I want to introduce Darren Fong, and then after him, Carolyn Shoulders, and they're going to talk about the next step in restoration of the area and providing for salmon habitat. Darren? It seems like the trick is just holding it out from your body, but not right against
maybe
your
if
belt.
I just put it right here and presume that people can hear me.
A scientist, perfect. Yeah.
Is that, okay.
He's got it because we're filming.
Okay, sorry. So I'll just hold it right here. So as Charlie mentioned, my name is Darren Fong. I work for the Natural Resources Division with Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And both Carolyn Shoulders and I have a really quick presentation that we're going to give to you that just describes a restoration project within the upper end of Muir Woods. Can we have the next slide? So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about the why for this restoration project. Carolyn's going to dive into the details of who, what, where, when, and how. So our main character for this restoration project is one of our 2 salmon species, and it's Coho Salmon. And you're probably going to hate me for this, but I'm going to throw up the scientific name for Coho Salmon, which is Oncorhynchus kissich. And the cool thing about this is its species name, which is the last part, which is kissich. And that actually comes from the inhabitants of the Kamchatka Peninsula over in Russia, because they actually have Coho salmon over there, and it actually extends down even into Japan. So the context is Coho salmon are actually pretty broadly distributed throughout its range. Again, starting from Japan, going up to Aleutian Peninsula, and then down Canada into Santa Cruz. So it's a pretty broad distribution. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what is the issue? And so the issue with Coho salmon is that in our area, Coho salmon, next slide please, thank you, are listed by the National Marine Fisheries Service and by the state as endangered. And the National Marine Fisheries Service, whoops, yeah, right there, has a recovery target to delist the species, at least in this area, as 272 adults. And so we have some data that's about 20 years of spawner survey data, which is just the counts of our nests or redds that the salmon make each winter. And if you presume that a nest is representing 2 unique individuals, you'll see that even in our biggest years, such as winter of 2004 and 5, where we had 90 nests, again, which represents the output of 2 individuals, so we're looking at about 180 adults. Even in these best years, we're way short of the recovery target of 272. So, next slide, please. So what I want to show you is just kind of where the coho are. We've done a lot of work with snorkeling and other forms of collection. And on the left, there's a graph of some surveys that we've done in, I think, 2014, where the circles represent where we found coho. And the size of the circles indicates how many coho we found. So you'll see that they're pretty broadly distributed, starting from the Pacific Way Bridge, going all the way up into the bottom of Muir Woods. And then you'll see this blank area between Bridges 1 and then State Park above Bridge 4. And so one of the things that coho like are big, deep pools. And that photo at the very top shows a classic site where you'll find lots and lots of coho. In fact, this is a site where we found a lot snorkeling. And this is an alder tree that has fallen root first upstream. And when that happens, during the winter, that forms an obstruction to flow. Water hits that root wad and it scours a deep hole under this root wad. And coho really need to get pretty big to survive in the ocean. They'll need to get to about 100 millimeters, which is, I think, about this. And they're about this deep. And so you need big, deep pools like this to support lots of coho. Unfortunately, Muir Woods doesn't look like this top photo. And if you hit the next slide. This is a slide that shows what typical conditions are just around Cathedral Grove in Muir Woods. I think that's around Bridge 3. And you'll see this is a photo that's in the summer, and the water depths here are very shallow. They're about like an inch or so deep. And so this is not a habitat that's going to provide for lots of coho. Next slide, please. And so again, the take-home message is that we have very poor pool habitat in Muir Woods, and we've done a lot of habitat surveys starting from Muir Beach all the way up into Muir Woods. We've done this for like over 20 years, and it's the same consistent message. And that's the information that you'll see over on the right. The far right bar is the amount of pool habitat that's in the Muir Woods project area that we're going to be doing work on. And the amount of pool habitat we have is about 30%. Ideally, we'd like to have pool habitats in the range of 50% or higher of the available habitat. And that's what you'll see in the rest of the creek. So next slide, please. So I think I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Shoulders. I'm also in the Natural Resource Division, and I'm a project manager for the actions we plan at Muir Woods now to try to address the problems that Darren described. Since we know that juvenile salmon are far less likely to survive at Muir Woods, we've planned a set of actions to give them exactly what they need, which would be pools. If you could go back to the original slide. So this picture is one specific location in Muir Woods where we're going to be taking action this year, and it demonstrates the problem. You see the rock on each bank there. That was riprap that was installed in the 1930s and contributes to the channelized condition, and you see it's really flat and straight and with very shallow water. And there is no deep water and there's no cover there for coho. So this is one area among others where we're going to take these actions. But I want to emphasize that this is a project where we take actions, but most of the real work actually happens after we're done, because we rely on the creek flows to scour the creek and alter things during the winter and create those kind of messy conditions where coho actually survive. So go to the next one. So the red area outlined shows where we're going to be removing 7 segments of riprap. That's 7 out of 13 segments that exist, but the riprap extends for more than half of that channel length. We'll also be moving large logs into the creek, both where we remove riprap in that red zone, plus at the blue dots that you also see. We're going to remove 350 linear feet of asphalt trail that's at the top of the bank in Cathedral Grove. That's a loop trail, so there'll still be a main trail through there. And that will allow leeway for the creek to change over time. And we're going to take some of that rock and add grade control to a tributary just upstream of Cathedral Grove that's incised and over deepened. And the purpose of that is to really start to evaluate how we can improve groundwater elevations in that area. We will be doing this work by taking heavy equipment into the creek. It will enter by staging up at Alice Eastwood and then drive down the Alice Eastwood Road, which is at the upstream end of Muir Woods, and enter the creek right near there. For equipment to go into the creek, we are required to remove the water to protect downstream water quality. And to remove the water, we first have to remove any fish that are in there. And because it's been a really wet year, Darren is expecting in particular a lot of steelhead juveniles, so that's a project in and of itself. And we'll have a pump set up at the upstream end of that area, which will be on 24/7, so there will not be any water in that part of the creek for about 3 months. We've done this many times. You set up a pipe and you route the water around to the downstream end of the work zone so that all the flows downstream are still clean and have as much water as they would normally. And to move the logs into the creek, we'll be using cables, kind of an old backcountry method. Each tree that we move in can take 2 to 4 days to get into the creek, depending on how big the tree is and how far it's going. And because of all of that, we'll be having some intermittent trail closures. Mostly things will be accessible, but you will find our trail closures on the website where we have little alerts shown at the top of the web page. So you can go to the next one. This is an example of where we're going to be adding wood. This is a redwood that fell across the creek just downstream of Bridge 4 at the very upstream end. But we didn't really get any habitat value out of that. The tree didn't hit the creek. And you can see, just like so many other areas, the creek itself is straight, flat, and shallow in a summer condition. So we're going to be adding some other large logs there in the creek and using the existing spanner there to help stabilize it. We'll start out by suggesting a little bit of a pool there, but over the future winters, we really expect to see more scour and more complexity develop there. So the next slide, please. I'm very optimistic this work will start exactly on time at the beginning of August. And equipment would be moving into the Alice Eastwood campground then. During that same period, we would start to remove fish. And they get all moved downstream, no more than 10 per pool, so it becomes a large project. And then the actual removal of the riprap probably wouldn't begin until late August or early September and continue into mid-October or late October. We did go through a long process with our regulators and ended up deciding to bury the riprap in the channel under very specific conditions. And very specific areas. There's some areas where we don't want to do that. And then there are 4 areas where we had the capacity and where it would be beneficial. Our regulators in particular were interested in us building up the height of the bed somewhat to help address incision in there. And then during that same period, the California Conservation Corps will be working with us as well as the trained trail crew from state parks to use those cables to move the trees into the channel. So by early November, mid-November, things will look a little different, but the real change is going to be over the future years, and that's when the real complexity will develop. So we're going to have fun watching it, and of course we'll be doing a lot of monitoring. So, Charlie, I guess that's it.
So the great thing about this meeting is that we are delighted to be, reporting that we are in year 2 of a 5-year plan, and that we're moving on schedule, and that a lot of exciting things are going on. Muir Woods will be looking really different in the couple years that come, and there are going to be some impacts, but we want you to know what and why we're doing it. And so we can all be really, really proud on what we've created together. A couple of years from now, we've also planned for enhanced visitor amenities. We obviously got aging infrastructure that was designed for a much smaller number of visitors. So that just kind of gives you a picture of what we'll be going in the next one there, Laura. We also want to report on some less glamorous. This is one of the highlights. So this is a $2.6 million project that consolidates existing wastewater pump stations and a wastewater, water, and telecommunications system. So even though this is not really an exciting thing, it really is a precursor to everything that we do, so that we make sure that we are taking care of our infrastructure and that we have what we need moving forward. And then, so we've talked a little bit about, actually quite a lot about Muir Woods and the planning and the restoration and stewardship. We know what is on a lot of Marin County residents' minds as we start the summer season is beautiful long summer days, and also preparedness for a variety of things that may or may not happen in the paradise that we all call home and work. So we're very proud to report the agreement with the Marin County Fire Department to carry out some thinning and fire activities for us. Our Park Service staff is pretty minimal, but we do have funding to support our partners, and that's pretty much the trend nationwide. Really happy that Chief Ranger Shifsky and I were able to meet with Stinson Valley community a couple weeks ago, and we were at the supervisors meeting out at Point Reyes this fall. So we try to be everywhere that we can, hearing community concerns. And I guess I would just echo what a lot of our agency partners are saying this time of year, whether it is fire season or the earthquake zone that we all live in. We just want to encourage you to start at home and be thinking about your neighborhood and your community. We will obviously be thinking about our agency lands, and whether it is fire season or an earthquake or some other kind of thing, just take a few minutes like we do every year to check smoke detectors. Just take a look at your own preparedness. Do you know where you're going to be to shelter in place if you have to for whatever reason, and do you have some supplies there? I can really speak for all the agencies that we work really seamlessly together, whether it is an accident on Highway 1 or whether it's a sloughing of a cliffside slope, or whether it is a fire that we really work hard all year long to make sure that we're coordinated and that we're ready in case there's an emergency in the community. So that sort of wraps up our kind of presentation. I wanted to just report one other sort of our emergency management thing that's sort of good news from our partner agency, our partner group. PG&E is going to be doing some work on their transmission lines in Oakwood Valley and also on the Alta Trail. So you'll be hearing some more about that in the coming weeks, and that's a good thing. That's them taking a look at their lines and making sure they're up to snuff, replacing poles. I think that's where I wanted to end tonight, and just give you an opportunity for questions. Laura, if you could grab that other mic. And remember, we're being filmed by the community cable service. And was there anything that you wanted additions to? We're also going to have opportunities after we formally end to meet with any of our subject matter experts. So if you want to just give a holler and we will send the mic your way. Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Carolyn, let me ask you a question about the restoration project. This is phase 1 of how many phases? Of 2, only 2.
Yeah, our second phase will work in the downstream half.
Yeah, right.
The second phase will be in the downstream half,
Okay, hold on.
down from about where we end up this year, all the way down next to the plaza area.
Okay, so next year. Then we also have the bridges that are going in.
And the bridges
What
and
I'm doing is kind of building up what we've all been concerned about, which is the accumulation of various projects that are coming along, some of which have not been mentioned. So it's the phasing of the restoration. And it's an exciting project. We want to see how it's going to proceed, and the 4 bridges replacement.
The first 2 bridges are scheduled to go in next year.
In case I was going to answer.
Oh, okay. And then next, when the repair of Frank Valley Road also, how does that phase going to work?
What Nona is referring to is the Redwood renewal palette of projects, which started, of course, with removing the road shoulder parking in the riparian area in Frank Valley, and then it moved to the implementation in 2018 of our reservation systems, and now the infrastructure work, both the water, wastewater, the salmon enhancement, and trail work starts up this year. Next year will be the first 2 bridges, the year after the next 2 bridges. There will also be transformation in the 4 parking lots and the connecting trails, as well as a new Dipsy Bridge. So that's what you have to look forward to over the next 4 years. These are planned carefully around a variety of conditions. We don't do work during the spotted owl season. We don't do work during the sediment issue times. These are all meant to be coordinated for efficiency and proper sequencing, so that's why they're happening over a 4-year period. So that's kind of the rollout of the Redwood renewal projects, and we just wanted to share in detail what you'd actually have this year. Was there anything more, Carolyn, to...
And thanks, Mia. I didn't introduce some of our staff. Mia Monroe, our longtime Marin County Community Liaison. David Shifsky, our Chief Ranger in the back. Allison Forstall, our Chief of Natural Resources. Cassie Anderson from Muir Woods. And then Christy from our veg plan. We also have representatives from our Mount Tam organization. And who else, Mia?
We have Elliot from our Redwood Creek Watershed Veg Team right back here, Rob Laporte and Claire from One Tam, and they have special things about the Bothene Marsh vision tonight to share. Laura.
Hi, thank you so much for your work. I had some questions, clarification. So are you going to be dewatering the main stem of the Redwood Creek 2 years in a row? Is that what I'm hearing? Or is the dewatering going to happen more frequently?
For phase
I
one,
got more questions.
we dewater it once over about 2.5 month period.
Okay.
Then when we do phase two, we dewater that area. But phase two isn't going to take place for another 2 or possibly even 3 years, Laura. So there'll be a break in between those.
And then how do you see the dewatering affecting the fish? I guess it was a Jump Start program with the Coho Salmon has, for all intents and purposes, ended in terms of removing the fishing and them going to the hatchery. Are you prepared to address issues regarding extreme rain events, which might actually cause more harm and then not have a recovery that you would anticipate? What I'm asking really is there some way to ensure that all this incredible work and volunteer work that's gone into these projects saving these fish is able to continue at this rate? Thanks.
I see sort of a bundle of questions in there, so I'm just going to respond to part of that. I'm going to let Darren respond here a little bit too. Well, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the one that I was most likely to respond to. Excuse me? Yeah, the dewatering, I'll say, that is actually partly to protect the fish, but I think you're familiar with all of that, correct? Right. So we don't expect to lose fish in that process because the protocol is pretty well defined there. So that's not your concern, right? It's really, when you refer to winter events, are you referring to the areas where we're not getting to restoration for a few more years? Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. Ideally, we would be doing it, we would have already done it. It's, I think, the best we can do. We'll get a lot of benefit from what we're doing this year. I think I'll let Darren speak to the Jump Start component there. And I will say this, though, this is actually what I originally wanted to say. We had wanted to do this project before our Jump Start program ended. And that just didn't work out. Too many things take time. So do you want to add here, Darren?
I think Carolyn added what I was going to mention was, we had hoped that a lot of the habitat restoration would have been done by the time we ended Jump Start, so we'd actually have the fish to see these newly restored areas. But I just wanted to go back to your first question or comment about dewatering. I think, as you probably already know, the dewatering is going to be a short-term impact. And we acknowledge that we're going to be taking fish that would normally like to be in an area that they're already in and taking them to an area where we already have fish. So there's going to be some stress associated, again, just for a short time for when we relocate these fish and put them in areas where we already have fish. So we kind of acknowledge that. So.
This is to the both of you, I think. As it relates to the reestablishment of the Coho Salmon in the creek, I've always been concerned about the use of that lagoon, particularly during the rainy season where the creek goes into the ocean, and the use of that lagoon by dogs and people and surfboards and everything else. How does that negatively impact, or does it negatively impact the reestablishment of the coho in that creek?
is embedded here, and maybe you can respond too. I think the primary impact to the juveniles is seasonal from those impacts. Darren, I actually think that it would be ideal if you responded to the surveys that you do in that area and what you actually find in the lagoon. The whole area is obviously enhanced since we did the restoration project down there, and the whole area at Muir Beach is more accessible at this point. But would you like to respond to the surveys that you've done literally in the lagoon and what you are finding there?
Maybe first, I don't know if we can specifically address the impacts of dogs or visitors in the lagoon on fish. We haven't had a study targeting that. But I think with respect to what we're doing in terms of monitoring right now, we do, like I had shown on the slide, adult spawner surveys where we're walking the creek from the mouth all the way up into Bridge 4 and state parks. And so we're seeing, where the fish are. We're also looking at in-stream habitat conditions during the winter for juveniles, marking out areas where there's sufficient depth and slow enough velocities where fish can reside. And we're also doing snorkel surveys where we're trying to count and identify areas that the fish are using. So within the Big Lagoon and also the adjacent restored areas, we definitely have areas that were probably minimally used prior to restoration that are now kind of better condition and better used. So I don't know if that totally answers your question.
Well, there are signs that are put up seasonally to disallow human and dog use of the lagoon, which is ignored for the most part by a good number of people. And again, I ask if that impacts truly the ability to...
I mean, one of the things that... one of the things that we notice is that when you have, lots of people in an area, that you have behavioral disturbances to not just fish but other animals. And so, one would expect that you have high numbers of people in the lagoon. The normal inhabitants, like, wading birds and others, are not going to be using that area as frequently as if you had people not in the water or dogs in the water.
So is there any intent to enforce the rules that you've got in place?
I would suspect that that's something that we'd want to do. I would defer to maybe Dave or Charlie.
So that's the conundrum that the National Park Service has and has always had, is providing for use and being an adamant steward of resources. And I would say most of us don't disagree. I know I can speak for the law enforcement staff that with property crime and crimes against people, we're not everywhere. So we continually rely on the public to identify repeat offenders or people that really are just out of control. But I know that one of the things that I do is fielding those kind of comments. So while I'm trying not to be a plutocrat and a bureaucrat and giving you an answer without giving you an answer, everybody on our staff will totally agree we would like to do more. And we also get calls from all of those recreational activities users who are adamant about how they want to use that. So I will also guarantee that we're not going to put this investment into Redwood Creek without ensuring that it's effective. He's nodding his head, so I'm going to say that's a win for Charlie. Thank you. Great questions. We have lots of time for more, and then the subject matter experts at the end there. Yeah.
So since we jumped to Muir Beach, I just was wondering if there's still an effort to widen the Pacific Way Bridge, since you're thinking of the whole creek and all of the issues dealing with salmon, and if there's any update on that.
It's so funny you should mention that.
Dennis, would you mind taking that one? Sorry.
Sure, I'm not sure I heard the whole question. I heard Pacific Way Bridge. Yes, thank you. So the county, in cooperation with the Park Service, has been working on the replacement of that bridge ever since the restoration took place. We've had a couple of versions of different bridges that were not acceptable to the community of Muir Beach. And so we currently are at the drawing board again, and we're going backwards to form a working group in the community that we would like to sit down with, go through all the data we have, and point out all the issues related to the resources, to the community's wishes, and try and come up with a conclusion that the community will support. And I'm hopeful that we can do that, but it'll take a lot of work, but we're trying to get a lot of the stakeholders at the table that may or may not want the bridge replaced. And I appreciate that it'll be a hard lift, but I think if we can get through the working group, hopefully we'll come back with a recommendation to the Park Service and the community to move forward with something, because it's a vital link. And I think that part of the restoration is still unfinished because of the bridge. So, thank you.
Thank you for Terry for asking that question, but it brings up a chance to recognize that the salmon work is being funded by the Coastal Conservancy. It's a grant. It's federal funds with a grant from the Coastal Conservancy. Help me get this right, Carolyn. And also a lot of technical support from the state of California and young people from the California Conservation Corps and North Bay Conservation Corps. So you prompted me, Terry, to just recognize that it's a big collaboration of work helping get that project done.
Thank you for your service. I represent the Tam Valley Volunteer Task Force. We just started this a couple months ago, and we had our first town hall here to educate the neighbors about get your go bag ready and all that. And we're waiting for the fire district to give us community refuge areas of where to go. And we're sitting around the table and we're saying, what happens in the worst case scenario if there are 5,000 cars a day at our doorway? We have these community refuge areas. Where do these people go? Do they know where to go? What kind of systems are in place? And the burden will be on Tam Valley to take these people in. And we had a conversation like, oh, does anybody know? And we're like, no, we don't. So we're asking you, what kind of alert system do you have? What happens if it is the worst case scenario? We don't know what's going to happen. We're all in this together, so.
Well, I'm going to start by where you just ended, and that is we're all in it together. And we could have, all of the agencies could have a stack of plans with everything we could possibly imagine, and guaranteed it'll be one piece of little of that. So what we've done with the reservation system is reduced the amount of traffic going through Muir Woods. So we're doing our part in reducing that traffic. And I want to say that the best way for that notification, based on working with the Marin County Fire Department at a recent meeting, is the Nixle system. And is anybody want to talk about just how we sign up? Basically, you're going to sign up, and that seems like that's one-stop shopping. Can you could somebody give the website or just talk about how you get signed up for those? So the first thing is the notification, and the second thing is where everybody goes. I'd love to be able to say, oh, we've got it platted out on a map in Marin County Sheriff's Office and the fire department. We're going to choose here, here, and here. And you know then what will happen. It will come from a different direction. All I can tell you is that we work constantly collaboratively, and that everybody's in touch, and that we're poised to move in a variety of different directions. So the most important thing is making sure that we're all aware of what's going on. And then the other thing is, don't move until you're told to, because you might be in the safest location, and we might need that traffic lane to, for some other purposes or whatever. So we want it to be coordinated, and I'll just let you guys jump in on how folks get notified and those kind of plans for a variety of contingencies.
First of all, hi, Lee, and thanks for coming. And Lee's done a tremendous job in this community, getting people together to have this conversation in regards to fire and what we would do in a real emergency in Town Valley. Alert Marin is what we want you to sign up for. Go to the website, Alert Marin. If you haven't signed up for it already, it's the best alert system that we have right now to get the information out if we have a real emergency. So please go to Alert Marin and sign up. There's been a lot of discussions locally on if we can do more. There was talk about having sirens and stuff like that. I don't know where some of those conversations are at, but as far as we are partnering with the Park Service and making sure that we have a good plan in place if an emergency happens. So those discussions are happening right now. But please go to Alert Marin and sign up. And thanks for being here, Lee. Nixle, if you sign up on Alert Marin, Nixle's very good too, and you'll get we're going to put the information out on there. We'll put the information out on Twitter. It's good to be part of all of these. I'm now on Nextdoor. That one's really good too. So these are all places that you can go, but we want you to sign up at Alert Marin. That's the one that we're really pushing as a county. Please go to that one first. But all those other ones are really great. The information's going to go out on all of them. Our Office of Emergency Services is ready to put that information out on all of those platforms.
So Alert Marin, remember that other thing that I said. Or forget the other thing that I said.
What about the tourists? Can you tell the tourists something? I mean, if you've got 5,000 tourists from all over, we know what to do with Alert Marin.
What would you recommend?
I wish I could. No one does. But
Yeah. Yeah, so I was not given a magic wand for that. So, we struggle just making sure that they get in and get out and that they respect the communities. And so I think that's just going to sort of take a village on, what I heard at the last meeting was they're going to get their directions from the first responders. And so basically, and because we live in Paradise and this is an international destination, I think the likelihood of us having something coordinated ahead of time of their visit is pretty limited. So we're really just going to rely on the first responders to respond to that, provide that information, and I can't really speak on whether we're directing them into your neighborhoods or whatever. It's just going to be very, very fluid. And anything that we would say today almost certainly will not be accurate in whatever happens. I think that's something we can all agree to, that we're going to just try to do the very best that we can, and it's going to be the folks on the ground. Did I do okay with that? Okay, lots of nodding heads, yeah. So, hi.
Is the Coho water salmon's food source as strong as the old house okay, so you know how you move them to the ocean? Is the food source as strong as their old house to the ocean, is what I'm trying to say.
Let me think if I can interpret your question. So are you asking that the food source for the coho in the ocean the same as what they eat in the creek? Okay. Is that, okay. So I think the food source of the coho in the ocean is different from what they eat in the creeks. In fact, a lot of fish actually move to the ocean because the food sources are actually more plentiful. If we had a sufficient number of food sources in the creek, they'd probably stay there. And so out in the ocean, Coho salmon and other salmon that leave the creeks feed on things like krill, which are a small crustacean. It looks a lot like shrimp. When they get to a certain size, they actually switch from krill to maybe small fish. And so in the creeks, juvenile Coho salmon feed on small aquatic insects. And also the trees that are overhanging on the creeks also support terrestrial insects like ants or flies that often drop into the creek. And those are drift organisms that both steelhead and coho feed on. So does that answer your question? Okay, thanks.
Thank you for asking that. I can guarantee most of the adults in this room had the same question, but they didn't want to ask that question.
Well, there's also a real exciting booth over here with Elliot and Chrissy, because behind the scenes part of our work is all the vegetation and revegetation in the riparian area to make sure that those critters that Darren was talking about have a recovering habitat. So learn even more details back there from them.
Hi, thank you for letting me ask some more questions. I really appreciate it. Are you familiar with the New Zealand mud snail and its invasiveness in almost all of the eastern Marin creeks? And are there going to be any protocols in place with the CCC and other organizations using different kinds of not so trained labor? Are you going to have supervisors, biologist supervisors, or oversight to make sure that those aren't introduced? Thanks.
I'll give that an absolute yes. All the boots have to be clean, protocols, tools, equipment, actually even upon exiting so that we don't export things like sod. We'll have a biological monitor there perpetually. I've mentioned that we relocate fish out of the way, but we relocate every critter out of the way. Slugs or whatever might be in the way. So that's all really taken care of. We have a long list of protections just for exactly that reason. And we wash our own boots. When we go from one site in the park to another, we have a protocol for washing our own boots. So yeah.
Thank you, everybody. We are all still here. So please enjoy the tables in the back there. Our subject matter experts and our agency officials, thank everybody for being here and for all of us committing to this. We really appreciate it.